Happy Tuesday, guys. This week has been a long week. Feels like it's only Tuesday. Oh man. I went to a strength and basically lifting class for continuing education this weekend. And ladies, I'm sore. We did a lot of lifting, some barbells and some weights. My body is tired and sore. And so you're probably going to see me moving a little bit funny tonight. But tonight we're going to talk about tight hips. This is an issue for so many ladies. So many of us. And I know this because, one, I used to have them. And then so many ladies that joined the Ride Life team have them. And it's an issue that can get solved. And there's several nuances with it. But we're going to talk about some main gigs, some main components. And we're going to talk about some of the areas that you may not have thought about before. You just knew they were a piece in a puzzle to it, but never really understood why. And that's part of what we're going to talk about. And then we're going to go over some foam rolling stuff and how to help with some of that. So it's going to be a fun-filled evening. And you're going to watch me move around like I'm sore, because I am. You guys should have seen me yesterday. It was like hard to get onto the toilet. So sore. So hips. The main area that we're going to be talking about today is like front of the hip tightness through here. A little bit in the side area here, but mostly this front part here. Once you get to back of like buttock tightness, it's a different type of mechanics, different type of things going on for it. And so we're going to leave that for another day because a lot of, if you feel buttock tightness, it actually can be some back stuff going on with that. So today we're going to talk about front and just to the edge of the side. So you guys know where your hip flexor is attached to. You guys know what hip flexors you guys have. A lot of times we think we understand things and then all of a sudden they're broken down for us and we're like, oh, that's where they go to and from. So there's technically 3 main hip flexors. One of them is part of your quad muscle. So one of them is part of this guy. It's the only part of the quad that crosses over your hip. Okay? It's called your rectus femoris. The other parts of your quad all reside on your femur, your thigh bone, and come together and form a big, nice muscle and go into this tendon to your knee, tendon to leg bone to straighten your leg. Your rectus femoris is the only one that crosses over top of the hip, and it plays a big role. The other ones that cross over and help with hip flexion, that are hip flexors, are your iliacus muscle and your psoas muscle. And usually those two are kind of paired together. They're called your iliopsoas muscle. But they have a pretty common, typically a common tendon as they attach to the femur, okay, as they attach down here. But they have 2 separate areas that they come up to attach to your trunk. And so when we think about things like this, one of the things that I like to do is to actually think about where they come and attach to and from. So rectus femoris comes down, resides on my thigh, comes into that tendon, and crosses over the hip. Okay? You'll see how that guy goes there. And so then as it contracts, it gets nice and shorter. It gets slacker. It flexes the hip. The iliacus muscle attaches on the top part of the thigh here. And if you feel your pelvis right here, if you flare it out on the inside of that flare, on the inside there, that's where your muscle actually resides. And so that's your iliacus muscle. Your psoas muscle, this is the main meat and potatoes. This is like our big mover of our hip flexors. It comes up, attaches to the front part of that guy, and then attaches to the front part of our spine. And so it goes like through our belly-ish and attaches to the front part of our spine. This guy is the guy that tends to get tight and bother us, along with our quad muscle there. Why? Why is this the one that tends to get more overworked, tends to get more things that are happening to it? It's because of its attachment point. It's because of what else is moving with it. And so as you think of something if I'm going to attach this to something else, if I'm going to pull it, I need to have traction to the floor. If I don't have nice solid traction to the floor, my feet are going to spin out. I'm going to use and lose a whole lot of energy. I will then be overworking to perform the task at hand. If I have a nice stay, if I take my socks off, then I can really pull on this wood floor and use my power, use my muscles, use my efficiency. If I don't, then I get that whole overworking like I just talked about. And so making sure that we have things that are stable and have a good pull from it is where we're going to use the best muscle efficiency. Is this making sense? Is this crossing over? And so as we talk about our psoas muscle, our femur attachment is what we want to be moving a lot of times. If we want to move our back muscles, or if we want to use the other attachment point, it'll arch our back and then that'll move that position. But a lot of times it's this position that we're wanting to work, we're wanting to use. And so then my pinpoint to my back, it has to be stable. It needs to get controlled. It needs to have that grounding. What muscles do that for my spine? If it attaches to my spine, then what muscles actually flex the spine? So it does the opposite of what that muscle wants to do. If that psoas muscle wants to pull and arch my back, what am I using to keep it still? What am I using to make it stay still so then I can move my leg versus doing kind of this? And I know we don't always do that, but it's those slight little movements that make a really big difference. It's our core. It's a lot of our abs. It's what keeps ourselves this nice cylinder. So it keeps it this nice area that's going to give you your stability and support for your hip flexors. Yes, Jenny, that's the one that can click. So if you were at the challenge this past week and you did the leg reaching out exercise, the leg lowering exercise, and you found that you were popping at your hip, these are things, and this is why it matters. This is why it's so important for your core to be working correctly, especially the lowermost core, so you can do this and support your spine and therefore let your hip flexor be able to do the work that it needs to be doing. That's why if you are doing any lower ab exercises, if you're doing any core exercises and you don't feel it in your core, you just feel it more so in your hip flexors or your thighs, and also potentially in your back, that you are not keeping your abs on, you're not keeping your core on enough to keep it stable. And so when you do those types of exercises, when you do exercises that may be too much for you, that may be too hard for you, then you're reinforcing these bad habits. You're reinforcing that stress on your spine. You're reinforcing that stress and just to overwork and use your hip flexors. You're not having things work as a team. Our body is meant to work mechanically as a team. Now, how those guys get their turn on and off is a lot of brain to body connection. And that's what we have to work on some of our exercises. Some of the lower levels in the climb crushers the program that I have that is having a special this week, it's mainly for that. It's understanding how to get your brain and your body to work together, to actually get these muscles to support each other, to come together. And so whenever you are using and doing some of those ab exercises, it's that you don't want to feel your hip flexor actually. It's when you're doing some of these other things, when you're riding the bike and you're climbing up those hills, or you're in that downhill position, if you feel here working a whole lot, your muscles aren't working together as a whole, because your hip flexors are not meant to be big movers. They're meant to turn on and off and on and off and on and off and not have huge loads on them. They can move quickly in that, like I'm sprinting, because I need to drive forward with that, you know? But I'm not like propelling myself forward like my glute is to me. Like the glute is like what makes me go forward. The hip flexor is just to make sure that I'm getting my leg up and moving forward so I have something to put my foot on. Like it's not meant to be a huge power muscle. It's made to move quickly. It's made to work with other muscles together. And so as you're doing these things, if your core has not been trained to work with the hip flexor, then you will put more stress on the hip flexor than it wants to have. You know what it does then afterwards? When you put more stress on the hip flexor than it wants to have? It's going to feel tight. It's going to feel like it's locking down. It's going to be overworked. And then you're going to be like, man, I just need to stretch my hip flexors. I just need to stretch them. That's what I need to do to solve my tight hips. Ladies, a lot of times stretching can help some, but it's not your full answer. It's not actually what you need to be doing for your body. It's actually strengthening. It's motor control. It's making sure that your core is working for you. Is this like correlating in your brain? Can I just get a yes if this is correlating in your brain? Is this eye-opening that I'm not coming on here and just giving you a lot of stretches for your tight hips? That you're understanding how these mechanics work together? It changes how you think about it and what you need to do to solve the problem. It's as you do this, it's like if I have something going on with my tires for my car and I just keep replacing my tires, well, I'm not probably fixing the problem. I'm just continuing it. I'm just going to keep having to replace my tires. It's that we have to change how the system is working. We have to change how your body is working. Last week I went over a ton of that information for the challenge for crushing the hills. Now it's time for you guys to implement, for you guys to do the exercises, for you guys to climb better, for you guys to feel better on your bike. Like, I don't just spout a lot of this stuff up to help me. It's to help y'all. Like, make your plan, develop the action, and make it happen. And so making sure that we work on the core to hip functions. This can be in so many different ways. It can be base level, as laying on your back and picking a foot up, like this one. And this is where you see that I'm sore, because that's really hard to lay down. Oh man. So even just tightening up your core and sliding a foot out and back and making sure that you're only moving at your hip and not at your back. Or you can start lifting it, making sure your stomach is nice and flat, you're not tenting in the middle, and that you're not feeling anything in your hip flexor or down into your quad. And so now you understand, if you feel it more hip flexor or quad, then you're using those muscles more than what they should be. We walk around, I can't get up. We walk around every day. We do steps, we go up, down, we go up hills, go up and do all these things. And so if you're doing a core-centric exercise, do we want your hips to work? Nope. Are you going to get tired really easy? Is it going to be a mental to body thing that you have to learn? Will it be amazing when you start realizing and having that application actually on the bike? When you have that application that you get done with the ride and you're not like, you get back out of the car and you're not like, oh, for the first couple steps, and then you can actually stand up. Doing these core exercises where you're understanding that control between your brain to your body means that whenever you are on your bike, you can start implementing that too. And that simple exercise of just lifting one leg and back down or sliding one leg out and back down will help a ton. If you want more, the special on the core crushers is this week. And I say that because I've gotten so much good feedback. There was one lady who told me she had all these other issues going on, and she was like, the pelvic floor and the lower levels to the core crushers has changed her life. It's made her where she can understand what's happening to her body. It puts her back in control. It gives her solutions and a path. And she emailed me this, and I'm just like, you were amazing. I freaking love it, girl. Keep going. So now let's talk foam rolling. And so you're like, well, Liz, you just told me not to stretch. I didn't tell you not to stretch. I just say it wasn't going to be your full answer. You can still stretch, but a lot of times you get more bang for your buck for doing that strengthening exercise, for doing that motor control exercise. Now, you may still also need to foam roll, because a lot of times whenever we have tight hips means that we are more quad dominant, that you will use more of these lovely muscles instead of this lovely muscle and this lovely muscle, because of your lack of core strength. To use your glutes more, you need more core strength. And so we will either pattern with a tight low back, tight hips, or the use of our core and our glutes. And we need those functions to work together. Otherwise, we'll feel tight in our low back and tight in our hips. And we don't want that tightness in the low back. We don't want tightness in our hips. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't make us happy. And so that goes in with that quad dominant behavior. It's another reason for you to work on your core strength, because core strength equals better glute engagement. But sometimes we need to foam roll in the middle of that. We need to take off and help some of the muscle recovery for our quads, for our hip flexors. There's a couple different ways that that you guys have probably been taught how to stretch your hip flexors or to work your hip flexors. One is even just laying on a tennis ball and have it pressing through your belly. Helps with pressing on a little bit of that psoas, or you guys have potentially even had a psoas release done for you. They suck. I'm sorry if you have. They're not fun at all. They're helpful, but they're not fun at all. Another thing that you can do at home that you may not think about is rolling actually the top parts of your thighs. And so this hits more so your rectus femoris muscle. And so you'll roll, actually, if I was laying down, you'll roll right here on the top part of your thigh. So bony part that sticks out, crease of my thigh, top part of the thigh. That's what you're going to be rolling onto. We'll see if I can do this with my soreness. And so you can roll just back and forth. And I actually like to put a little bit more weight onto one side. So you see me shift it over towards my left side a little bit. And then you can roll back and forth. If you do not feel enough with a foam roll, then snag a tennis ball. And you should be able to dig in there a little bit deeper. These are my tennis balls that are taped together. But you should be able to dig in a little bit deeper with a tennis ball in that same region. going to go mainly in the middle part of that thigh on the upper part here. If you, after this live, just Google rectus femoris and you'll see where it resides and where it goes. That's what you're hitting through this one. It'll help a ton. Another thing is whenever you are stretching your hip flexor, don't put more stress on your back, okay? It's not good to stress your back whenever you are stretching your hip flexor. And so a lot of times we'll go into what's called the runner's lunge. Stretch. And you'll be here and you'll come like this. Well, if you think about where my hip flexor goes to and from my back to my hip, and I want to stretch, but I just moved everything forward because I arched my back as I moved my hip back. Is that helpful? Or am I just going to get to the end range of where my back wants to extend and then I'll start to stretch my hip flexor? It's probably going to be more so like that. And so folding over the front part and then dropping your hip, that's what's going to help with opening up actually this hip, because I can get the hip extension without an extension of my back. And so I'm supporting my back as I'm stretching my hip. Now, you remember me telling you that I used to have tight hips? I did. That stretch, even as sore as I am, I'm not tight there, because I didn't overuse my hip flexors as I was doing my lifts this weekend. I'm sore on my core, I'm sore on my quads, a little bit of my glutes, my hammies, back is really good. My lats and my shoulder blade muscles are sore and tired. But all the places I'm supposed to be tired and sore from doing these lifts, I'm not sore and tired in other places that I don't want to be. And so that's another thing to note. When you're doing exercises, when you're doing these things, it's noting where are you feeling the muscles working? Where are you feeling that they're engaging? If you're doing a core exercise and you feel it in your low back, is that okay? If you're doing a core exercise and you feel it in your hips or your thighs, is that okay? Is that going to make you feel better? Is that going to make you feel stronger? Is that going to help you with getting out of the saddle? Is that going to help you for climbing? Is that going to help you for riding your bike? Nope. It sure doesn't. Is it going to help you for being able to use your glutes? So making sure you're utilizing these exercises, you're doing the workouts, you're doing the stuff that is important to you and your body, and it's working the right stuff. Any questions on this? On these tight hips? And how the use of your core actually makes things work together as a whole. And that you may still need to stretch, but stretching in a way that supports your back. You may still need a foam roll, but foam roll in a way that hits and targets some of these muscle groups. But you also really need to work on your core strength. Really need to work on that motor programming, that motor planning, or what I call motor control. Sweet. Well, you guys, ladies, have a fantastic night.